Hi there, welcome to my tutorial looking at how to write UCAS personal statements. My name is Jal Patel. I'm a tutor of politics. I used to be a head of politics at a busy sixth form college in London. I'm also the editor of alevelpolitics.com. If you do study politics, you can contact me through that website, and you can also access a number of resources I've put available, in particular essays and various other little bits that will help you with preparations for politics exams as well as politics content. You can find me also on Twitter at PatelShop, as well as my Substack account. If you study politics, it's a great place to get news resources in order to write good quality essays. Now, this tutorial is not just aimed at politics students. I was also a personal tutor, and I've been helping students with personal statements for some time. And I know that today's content would apply probably to most social science, humanities-based subjects. So if you're going on to study, say, history or geography, or if you're going to study law, for example, or sociology or psychology, or any essay-based subject, I suspect this tutorial is going to be good for you. I also think that even if you're not going to study an essay-based subject, say a science, I think a lot of the content today will be applicable. So this is a general tutorial, but I am going to use politics examples. Now, if you want access to those examples, just go over to my website, and I'm going to put up a drive with a number of personal statement examples, as well as the slide from today. So you can go straight to my website and download those examples. And I may put up some non-politics examples as well, just to illustrate how to write personal statements for various disciplines. Right, so let's start with the basics. Now, I would say that writing a personal statement is actually quite a challenging task. Most of you have not written a piece about yourselves, and I don't blame you if you're spending a lot of time working out how to put pen to paper, because it's a difficult task. You're going to have to talk about your positives. You're going to have to talk about your experiences. And that is not an easy thing to do. Now, many students struggle to get the tone and the content right. And often it takes months to get a first draft done. And I think that's a challenge lots of students face. I mean, I've yet to meet a student who can just go and type up a personal statement within a half an hour or an hour sitting. It normally takes a number of drafts, and that is not a problem. Now, I would like to say that personal statements are not the only pieces of evidence that a university will use in order to offer you a place on a course. It's one of several pieces of evidence. So they're going to look at, for example, your teacher's reference. I mean, your teacher's reference is extremely important. So if, for example, you want to adapt that teacher's reference, or you want to include anything in that teacher's reference, it's good to have a conversation with your teacher before that reference is written, because I think that's really important. But your predicted grades, of course, matter as well. If you don't match the predicted grades of the university, it's unlikely you're going to get an offer, even if your teacher's reference and your personal statement is fantastic. So it's important that, of course, you look at your personal statement in the round. It's part of an array of evidence that universities will use when they offer you a place. Now, when thinking about writing a personal statement, it's always essential to consider what universities are looking for, i.e. what's the aim, the objective of your personal statement. So let me set out maybe some fundamental objectives that I think a university will be looking for when they read your personal statement. So number one, you want to tell a university that you genuinely are interested in studying the specific chosen course. So it's not just about telling the university that you're a great student. You want to convince them that you're going to be a great international relations student or a great law student, right? So you want to be specific about your course. A personal statement must demonstrate that you have essential student habits and skills. Punctuality is really important. Wanting to study, researching, enjoying learning. They're going to look at your teacher's reference for these indicators. Are you someone that turns up on time? Are you someone that wants to study? Do you have a love for study? Do you like researching, or at least do you have the prerequisite skills for researching? Do you enjoy learning, or is it that you're going to university just because you want to tick a box? You want to show that you are going to find learning particularly enjoyable. A personal statement must demonstrate that you have an inquiry in mind and that you can think critically. Undergraduate study is all about inquiry, it's about research, it's about thinking in a critical way. So it's extremely important that you demonstrate these skills when you write your personal statement. So, with all of this in mind, think about a personal statement as if you're attempting to convince a university of the above three objectives, right? And you want to convince them that you can meet the criteria of what they understand a good student is, and that you're going to enjoy the chosen subject because you are particularly interested in that chosen subject, right? And I'm not saying anything which probably your teachers haven't told you, but I think you want to keep those three overarching objectives in mind when you craft a personal statement. So let's talk about, firstly, what to avoid when putting together a personal statement. Firstly, you don't want to be general. Be specific. Discuss a theme within the subject you want to study, for example. What I mean by that is don't just talk about history as a discipline. I love history, or I'm very passionate about history, and I'll talk about the word passionate a bit later. Don't just say that. Talk about the specific bit of the subject, the specific part of the subject that you're particularly interested in. So you can say, for example, I am interested in trying to understand the challenges of globalization in a post-COVID era. So you're interested in globalization and you've linked it to COVID, right? Rather than just saying, I'm interested in international relations, because international relations is a pretty big discipline. It's a huge discipline. History is a huge discipline. You want to talk about what part of history. Are you interested in Nazi Germany? Are you interested in Stuart England? Are you interested in, I don't know, the American Civil War? Are you interested in slavery? Are you interested in colonialism, in British colonialism in India? What's your interest? What particularly do you find that provokes your interest in the subject, in your chosen subject? Now, when you write personal statements, don't exaggerate. Don't use exaggerated words. My pet hate is passionate and enthralled because everyone uses it and it's run out of value. It's lost its value. You don't need to say you're passionate about a subject because you're not really. You may not be. I mean, you're probably interested in the subject, and that's probably a good word. Find synonyms for interested. Don't try to overplay it. I mean, I'm passionate about, I don't know, coffee or tea. I'm not really passionate about politics. I like politics. I'm interested in politics. I study politics. I research politics, right? But I'm not passionate about it. And anyway, even if you are passionate about it, I would suggest that it's an overused term. Write your personal statement in a calm way, in a way that's informative rather than emotional. I think that's a good way to think about your personal statement. You're informing and convincing. When you write an essay for your teacher, you don't use the word passionate. I've never heard the word passionate being used when a student says, I don't know, Donald Trump reversed the Paris Climate Change Summit, and I'm very passionate about the environment. No one says that in an essay. You keep it strictly formal. And I think that's how a personal statement should generally be. There are exceptions, I think, but generally speaking, you want to write in a formal register. Demonstrate that you're a good student and you want to study. Don't just tell them this, demonstrate it, right? So you're not here to just say, I'm passionate about politics. That means that's meaningless. You want to demonstrate what you've done and what you've read to make you interested in politics. Now, you're not trying to demonstrate that the subject is a great one. They know that already, right? You're not trying to convince them of something that they already know. You're trying to convince them that you're suited to the subject and you have thought about your application, you want to be able to convince them that it is the subject for you. Now, I don't think it's wise to use quotes from famous people. Look at your personal statement as a really important piece of real estate, right? And if you clutter it with Gandhi and Malcolm X, it doesn't. Or I don't know, Mother Teresa. I was going to say Theresa May there. Mother Teresa. It's probably not going to be very productive. You don't want to do that, right? So stay away from those sorts of references. Now, another pet hate of mine is don't tell your life story. Like, don't say when I was in India at the age of 5, unless, of course, it's relevant to your application, right? There's no real reason why you need to talk about your childhood. Unless, of course, there's an aspect of your childhood that does matter and it does impact the subject you're going to study. But be very careful. Don't say, well, my dad used to take me to the library, and then as a result of that, I want to study English literature, right? There's just no link between the two, right? Or, I watched, I don't know, The Resignation of David Cameron on TV. And at that point, I realized I want to study politics. There's not much of a link there when you try to connect one with the other. So I feel you don't need to tell your life story. Keep it formal. Try to convince them of those 3 objectives that we laid out at the very beginning. Now, this is quite a controversial point, but extracurricular work is not important unless you can link it to your subject that you want to study, or you can demonstrate a broader transferable skill. Don't just say that you are a badminton player or a table tennis player. So what? If you can suggest that these skills that you have, maybe you've played for a badminton team, and that has given you a broader transferable skill. You're a team player. You're able to meet deadlines. That's great, right? But it's not necessary to just go on about your extracurricular work. And I would leave the extracurricular paragraph to the very end. There's no formula, but I think that's a good idea because at the heart of your personal statement is you want to demonstrate you're interested in the subject, and then you can move on to extracurricular as long as you link it to these 2 areas. So let's talk a little bit about structure. And I know that lots of teachers would say, and universities will say, structure doesn't matter. So I'm not going to over-egg this and say that you have to write a personal statement exactly how I've laid this out. So there's no magic structure. But I feel that you can probably put a personal statement together like this. Have an opening paragraph explaining why you want to study the course. So you can start like this. I would like to study international relations because I would like to make sense of the current world order and why it is argued that we are living in an era of power transition. That's really neat, right? It's pretty formal. It may even come across as pretty bland, but that's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear, at the age of 6, I had this transformational moment. And as a result of that, I now want to study international relations. I don't think that's a very good way of starting, right? So keep it bland and keep it really direct. That's a direct first sentence. This first sentence opens the door to a theme you want to discuss in your personal statement. You're going to talk about the world order and power transition as a way to demonstrate you like the subject, right? So then the next paragraph or 2 can be on your study and research of this above theme. So you can then talk about power transition, for example, and what you've done to demonstrate, to research how power transition is illustrated in the modern era, right? So remember, you're picking on a theme. You're not just talking about international relations or history or politics as a broad discipline. You're picking on a theme or a couple of themes maybe within that particular subject. Now, you may want to talk about your other A-level subjects. So if they've helped you to move towards your chosen subject. But you don't need to spend so much time on this. I know sometimes teachers say, well, do talk about your other subjects, and that's fine. But do it in so much as it helps a university to determine that you are suited to study that subject, right? To study international relations or law, wherever it may be. So you may spend as little as much time on your A-level subject, as long as you don't lose sight of the ultimate aim, which is to demonstrate your subject knowledge. Then in your final paragraph, you can demonstrate broader skills, your student habits of research, your punctuality, your study, and perseverance. These are personal skills that you can demonstrate in that final paragraph, as well as your extracurricular work or your extracurricular activity, which helps to further elaborate or further evidence these student habits. Remember, show, don't tell. Don't just say, I'm going to be very punctual when I come to university. Demonstrate that you have been punctual when you had your newspaper around for the last 2 years. Don't just say, I persevere, right? Say that I studied biology and it was a very difficult subject, but I persevered to get a very good mock exam result. So show, don't tell. Now, you don't need a dramatic conclusion. There's no dramatic arc here. You're not really here to demonstrate some drama at the very end, right? Lots of students often end their personal statements with this sort of catch-in final sentence, whatever the term is, a dramatic last sentence. You don't need to do that. If at the end of your extracurricular paragraph you've got nothing else to say, stop there. Yeah, there's no need for a conclusion. Okay, let's talk about that paragraph where you're trying to illustrate your ability to think, research, and study. Now, the best way to do this is to talk about your reading or the reflections you've made on lectures that you've attended. Now, these lectures or this reading has to be of a particular academic bent. Don't just go to a debate at your school and say, well, I attended this great debate between students and it made me think about the following. That's not enough. You've got to go to or listen to an LSE debate. A good tip for you is just log on to LSE's great website and you will find lots of events, past events that you can download and watch on YouTube. And it will be sufficient to say that you then attended or you watched that event and you're now going to reflect on what you experience as a result of the contents of that event, right? So talk about what you have read in your chosen theme. So remember, if your chosen theme is the world order changing and going through transition, then read an article or two about that theme and talk about your reflections on that article. I'm going to show you some examples of personal statements where students have done that really effectively. Now, I've included some articles in my shared drive that I'm going to link at the bottom of this video. I've put together a number of politics-related articles that you may want to use and talk about in your UCAS personal statement. So show that you are on a journey and that your opinion can change. That's pretty good. Don't just say that I've read this article and I'm convinced. Say that I've read this article and it really interested me and these are my reflections, but I'm open to further inquiry. That's a good phrase to put into a personal statement. I'm open to further research. I would like to develop my research and find counter views so that I can either consolidate my opinion or broaden my opinion or be convinced of another opinion, because that demonstrates that you have got the prerequisite research and study skills. If you've written an EPQ, this is important to discuss as part of demonstrating your research skills. So EPQs are pretty good. Extended projects, if you've done them, talk about them as part of demonstrating this. Right. Now, here are some examples of first paragraphs. So I believe a study of politics and international relations would enable me to explore the world's most intractable and critical debates, while also offering a valuable academic insight into the modern nation state. I feel I am entering the discipline at a crucial moment in the post-COVID Cold War era, rather. That's a really fancy first sentence, by the way, or first couple of sentences, but that's quite a nice opening. Here's an interesting second or first paragraph. If we could, let's call this a starter, and then this can be our second paragraph or our first paragraph, as I've said here. So this student talks about her reading. Richard Haas argued in the unraveling, and then you don't have to do that, to be honest, but you can do. You don't have to cite the article. That the disappearing post-Cold War order will soon be replaced by a more chaotic international system. He cites the decline in respect for the US economic and political model after the 2008 financial crash and America's clumsy intervention in the Middle East as the main cause. Now, here we go. In many ways, Haas was prescient. Writing before the Trump era would overturn decades of US thinking. Here's your reflection. While I agree, use the first person, that's great. While I agree with the USA's shortcomings, could contribute to its gradual undoing, I think Haas undermines the significance of what Gideon Rachman calls Easternization in this process. So you're contrasting two bits of reading that you've used, that you've read, and you've done it and this student has done it in a very good way. And then the student goes on to talk about Gideon Rachman's views, and the student then says, however, this disregards their substantial cultural, economic, and political differences. Undergirding this is a more confident and assertive China on the world stage, announced by President Xi at the most recent Communist Party conference, and so on and so forth. In my mind, that's a nice turn of phrase. In my mind, this increased tensions that and could create a context in which decisions by both actors might escalate for a potential conflict, right? So, that's a nice paragraph, actually, because it contrasts two bits of reading and it shows plenty of reflection. Don't just quote the reading, go on to reflection, analyze the reading rather than just quote it. And there are plenty of interesting paragraphs here. I'm not going to go through these in any great depth, but here we go. This is quite good. I would like to pursue a degree in history and international relations because I believe the two subjects enable me to develop an informed study and internationalist approach to the world. This outlook has been furthered by my Spanish A-levels, and I believe aspiring to see the world beyond more immediate events makes one more rounded and tolerant. That could be phrased a little better. But the student is saying that my Spanish A-levels has given me some qualities to access history and international relations. However, I also acknowledge that the mindset must be informed and challenged by depth of study, and this is why I want to read history and international relations. And then the student goes on to look at her reading, and it's really good. It's a really well-crafted paragraph. I would advise you to read it. And for those of you who are going to apply for history, there's some great answers here that looks at history as a discipline as well as reading history. They talk about meeting Kate Washington at the UN headquarters in Athens and what they got out of that, right? So this is showing interest in the subject. This is another paragraph that demonstrates reading and reflection. COVID-19 has not only shaped global politics for the last 10 months, but it will likely continue to do so for years to come. Because of this, the study of politics and international relations has been so crucial, right? So that's your first sentence or first couple of sentences. And then you go on to, the student goes on to, I think it was a male student here, if I'm not mistaken, but then he goes on to his study. So foreign affairs, he read foreign affairs, an article, and he looked at the impact of COVID, and again makes some reflections at the very end there, actually during the paragraph, right? As authoritarian governments are arguably on the rise already, for example, Hungary has introduced an emergency powers laws, which has given the government extensive powers in order to fight the pandemic. Could it be that COVID-19 is the emergency that threatens Western democratic values? A question there that the student has posed as a reflection on his reading. And again, this is a nice reflection on reading. I would like to further my studies and want to investigate the complex myriad of political, economic, and strategic relationships, alliances, and enmities between different states in an attempt to grasp how and why the world's most defining contemporary conflicts originated and continue to maintain in the modern world in which we live in. And the student then goes on to look at a piece of reading and their reflection on that piece of reading, right? This is a nice paragraph that you can look at later when you download the slides, but it's a very nice paragraph looking at the journey. I'm also interested in a way in which comparing two different historical periods can enrich an appreciation of both. For example, during the Oxford University summer school, which I attended, my understanding of World War I was deepened by an online series of Yale University lectures. So they looked at these lectures, and then they went on to look at the Thucydides' depiction of history, and then they went on to look at to go on to participate in a model UN, and then they subsequently read E.H. Carr's What is History, and then they went on to write a extended project, right? So they went on a research journey. That's a nice paragraph. I did this, it led me to this, it led me to this, and it led me to this. I think that's a good way to craft that second paragraph, that looks at the subject and the discipline within the subject that you're interested in. Here's an example of that last paragraph, the extracurricular paragraph. So representing Cuba in a 3-day Model United Nations conference allowed me to experience a taster of this difficulty that Miss Washington had explained. The conference also led me to research further into Cuba's current relationships with America. Again, the journey. I was particularly struck by how Cuba's nationalization of oil refineries in the 60s and its role in the 1962 missile crisis still dominated the current discourse between nations, right? I'm very interested in the world of international diplomacy. To consolidate this interest, I was able to arrange independently a visit to the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. I met such and such person, and this is what I got out of it, right? So that's a good way to weave in an extracurricular activity into your personal statement. I think that's a nice paragraph. And do look at the example when you download it from my website. Okay. Here's another example. My completion of the Brilliant Club's Scholars Program in 2016. Put in the comments below if you can explain what the Brilliance Club is. I don't know what it is. Demonstrated my eagerness to engage with challenging academic material. I attended many seminars given by a PhD tutor on creative problem solving, a subject completely foreign to me. I was thrilled. Okay, I wouldn't use the word thrilled, but anyway, I was thrilled at the opportunity to write a university-style essay based on this, as I got to develop my independent research skills and write an academic piece on something much more complex than anything I had studied. Anyway, it's a good way to, again, talk about extracurricular work. Here's how to use personal hobbies. I pride myself on being able to work under pressure and always aim high. So now we're going to demonstrate that. Growing up as a dancer and competing at regional levels made me very competitive, meaning I always want to be the very best version of myself at whatever I do. Training in ballet has enabled me to become disciplined and dedicated, as it is an art form that requires constant practice. This student doesn't want to go on to study ballet or going to study dance, but they're using dance as a way to demonstrate those broader skills that I talked about at the very beginning, right? And I think that's a nice way to do that. I believe it has given me resilience and allowed me to value hard work, but more importantly, has enabled me to be open to challenge and criticism. Right. I think that's it. That's probably all I have to say about personal statements, except my view is don't prevaricate. Don't spend a long time thinking about a personal statement. Start drafting it. Use that structure and put it together straight away. Your first draft is never going to be that good. And so once you've got something on paper, you've now got something you want to amend and you want to change. So you're going to go through a number of drafts before you get to a final version. The worst you can do is spend weeks or months even just sort of planning a personal statement and not getting down to writing it. So start writing it straight away and then add to it and then amend it. Now, of course, you are going to have a couple of readings and maybe lectures that you've attended or that you've watched that you want to talk about. So do that first, of course. But once you've done that and taken some quick notes on it, get down to writing your personal statement. I hope you found that interesting. If you want to contact me and ask me any questions, use the comment section on YouTube and I will certainly answer those questions when I can. I usually answer within a day or so. If you are a politics student, do go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter. And I do arrange a number of events in the year. I do some physical events where students attend revision days, as well as online webinars, and you're welcome to attend those. But thank you for listening, and I hope you've taken plenty of notes, and do contact me if you have any questions. Goodbye for now.